Hey guys. Okay, so I was asked to run through another one of these passages. I'm actually going to do one for, just turning that up, I hope that helps. I'm doing one for the literature exam and one for the language exam. So I'm going to try to accomplish two things. First, how to go about constructing a proper thesis statement from the prompt that you're given, and second, a basic outline of the essay that I would choose to write. So I like calling it the pickle passage. I think it's funny. It's Friday and I needed something a little bit funny, because we all do. So that's the one that I chose for our work today. I am going to first read through the prompt. I'm going to then read through the passage, and then I'm going to talk about how to construct a thesis based on this prompt and, quite frankly, any prompt that you are given. So this is the 2017 exam. It states, in the passage below from The Adventures of Peregrine Pickle by Tobias Smollett, Mr. Pickle encounters Godfrey Gauntlet, the brother of his beloved Amelia. Consider how the two men confront their own uncontrolled emotions and yet attempt to abide by their social norms. In a well-developed essay, this is where you're going to see what you're doing. It always says in a well-developed essay. What it says after that is what you're analyzing, which is how you construct your thesis, really. Analyze how the author explores the complex interplay between emotions and social propriety in the passage. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of what the prompt says because this year they're not giving you specific techniques to look for. And I, in fact, am going to choose some different techniques than are listed there. Okay, so let's read the passage. We start off. Mr. Pickle, you have carried on a correspondence with my sister for some time, and I should be glad to know the nature of it. To this question our lover replied, Sir, I should be glad to know what title you have to demand that satisfaction. Sir, answered the other, I demand it in the capacity of a brother, jealous of his own honor as well as of his sister's reputation, and if your intentions are honorable, you will not refuse it. Sir, said Peregrine, I am not at present disposed to appeal to your opinion of the rectitude of my intentions, and I think you assume a little too much importance in pretending to judge my conduct. Sir, replied the soldier, I pretend to judge the conduct of every man who interferes with my concerns, and even to chastise him if I think he acts amiss. Chastise, cried the youth, with indignation in his looks. Sure you dare not apply that term to me. You are mistaken, said Godfrey. I dare do anything that becomes the character of a gentleman. Gentleman, God wot, replied the other, looking contemptuously at his equipage, which was none of the most superb, a very pretty gentleman truly. The soldier's wrath was inflamed by this ironical repetition, the contempt of which his conscious poverty made him feel, and he called his antagonist presumptuous boy, insolent upstart, and with other epithets which Perry retorted with great bitterness. A formal challenge having passed between them, they alighted at the first inn and walked into the next field in order to decide their quarrel by the sword. Having pitched upon the spot, helped to pull off each other's boots, and laid aside their own coats and waistcoats, Mr. Gauntlet told his opponent that he himself was looked upon in the army as an expert swordsman, and that if Mr. Pickle had not made that science his particular study, they should be upon a more equal footing in using pistols. Peregrine was too much incensed to thank him for his plain dealing, and too confident of his own skill to relish the other's proposal, which he accordingly rejected. Then, drawing his sword, he observed that were he to treat Mr. Gauntlet according to his deserts, he would order his man to punish his audacity with a horsewhip. Exasperated at this expression, which he considered an indelible affront, he made no reply, but attacked his adversary with equal ferocity and address. The youth parried his first and second thrust, but received the third on the outside of his sword arm. Though the wound was superficial, he was transported with rage at the sight of his own blood, and returned the assault with such fury and precipitation that Gauntlet, loath to take advantage of this unguarded heat, stood upon the defensive. In the second lunge, Peregrine's weapon entering a kind of network in the shell of Godfrey's sword, the blade snapped in two, and left him at the mercy of the soldier, who, far from making an insolent use of the victory he had gained, put up his Toledo with great deliberation, like a man who had been used to that kind of recounters, and observed that such a blade as Peregrine's was not to be trusted with a man's life. Then, advising the owner to treat a gentleman in distress with more respect for the future, he slipped on his boots, and with sullen dignity of demeanor stalked back to the inn. Okay, so first off, what do we have here? Let's look back at the prompt. We've got Peregrine Pickle, and we've got Godfrey Gauntlet. Now, I will say that my students this year had a really hard time with the first paragraph in knowing who was speaking. So if you look, the first person says Mr. Pickle, right? So you could determine that he's not speaking in the third person. That would be Godfrey Gauntlet speaking. And then the next guy that speaks. So if you just switch back and forth, and really it doesn't matter that much. What you're looking at is you're analyzing how the author explores the complex interplay between emotions and social propriety in the passage. Okay? So we're looking at the interplay of emotions and social propriety. So when you're creating a thesis, essentially what you're doing is you're taking the prompt as your guide or your template and then adding to it how whatever's being asked for is shown or accomplished. Okay, so we have social propriety and emotion. Complex interplay, right? Okay. So all you have to really do in order to create a thesis is to take that, whatever it says when it says in a well-developed essay, analyze how the author explores the complex interplay. I wish I could figure out how to record this differently and I could have two screens, but I tried doing that and it didn't record. So analyze how the author explores the complex interplay. So we're going to say analyze how the author explores the complex interplay. Hang on. I'm going back to the passage now. Between emotions and between emotion and social propriety. Okay? So that's what we're being asked to do. Here's how you create your thesis. I'm just creating the thesis, not the opening paragraph. So Smollett, in this passage, Smollett shows the complex interplay of these two characters' emotions and social propriety through, and here I would talk about dialogue. I would talk about selection of detail and I would talk about, I would go pace and selection of detail. Now, instead of pace, you could really say organization, kind of. When I'm talking about pace is, if you notice in that first, well, maybe I can wait. I can talk about that later. So really, if you look, the first part of your thesis is already written, okay? I just copied it, essentially. The complex interplay between these two characters' emotions and social propriety. But then I'm talking about how I've determined that. I've determined that through dialogue, through the pace of the piece, and through the selection of detail. Okay? So if you wanted to take this and then create an opening paragraph, Brothers in general are usually protective of their sisters when it comes to matters of love. In the passage, in the excerpt from the Adventures of Peregrine Pickle, we see a brother challenging love interest of his sister. The exchange between the two heightens quickly, but both understand the need to abide by social norms. And then there's my intro paragraph. I end with my thesis. So if we're reading this, brothers in general are usually protective of their sisters when it comes to matters. Sorry. Oh, go away. There. Nope, that didn't make it go away. Okay. This is fun because you're watching my technology inability. There we go. No, that's not going to make it go away either. Here, just stop being stupid. There. Okay. Brothers in general are usually protective of their sisters when it comes to matters of love. Now, would I need to include that? No. Here's one thing that I did not do, and this is something that honestly you could just directly notice from the passage, that this baby is a book, so it's going to be italicized, okay? In the excerpt from The Adventures of Peregrine Pickle, the reader sees, not we. Oh, Meryl. The reader sees. If you said we see, it wouldn't be the end of the universe, but this is better. The reader sees a brother challenging a potential love interest of his sister. The exchange between the two heightens quickly, but both understand the need to abide by social norms. In this passage, Smollett shows the complex interplay of these two characters, because it's both of them, so the apostrophe after the S, emotions and social propriety through dialogue, pace, and selection of detail. So then what I would do is I would first talk about dialogue. Okay, one thing that I notice is the word sir or sire. Sir is used in the first parts of the conversation, but slowly fades from the conversation. If you notice in the back and forth, they're initially referring to one another as sir, even though they're arguing. So they're trying to stay polite and appropriate even during an argument. The other thing that I would say is the dialogue is compacted into a single paragraph. It makes it faster to read. It's a more realistic back and forth conversation. I think that would be a good thing to say. That kind of goes into the pace of it. So I would play on the whole sir, sir, and then pretty soon it's just like I'm tossing sir right out the window. If you notice in the passage, it's about halfway through. Sir replies, so I pretend to judge the conduct and then chastise, like, okay, you crossed the line, dude. And that's when they decide that they're going to handle this with a duel, right? So you could definitely expand on that a lot more in talking about the dialogue, how they're trying really hard to be appropriate, but even in the way they are referred to, lover, soldier, brother, etc., it shows how the conversation is ramping up. And I need an A for and. Okay. So then the next thing that I would talk about is the pace of the piece. So you start with a dialogue that quickly ends up in a duel. Okay. Then it's sudden, so that I would say is fast. Within one paragraph, the two decide to duel it out, right? Then I would say in the next paragraph, they take the time to, notice right here, I'm going to put this up one more time. It says, the contempt of which made him feel, he called his antagonist a presumptuous boy, insolent upstart, with other epithets. A formal challenge having passed between them, they alighted at the first inn and walked into the next field in order to decide their quarrel by the sword. Having pitched upon the spot, helped to pull off each other's boots, laid aside their coats and waistcoats. Okay, so they take the time to help each other off with their boots, take off their coats, take off their waistcoats. So what I would say with that is, I thought that would do a cool thing. I kind of did. It suddenly slows down. They are taking the time to duel fairly instead of letting their emotions get the better of them. You know, and they're helping each other with taking off of the boots. I mean, who does that? If you're going to fight already. Obviously, in that time, that would have been appropriate. You know, you're not supposed to just sneak up on somebody. But then also notice what happens next. We were right here. He was looked upon as an expert swordsman, and if Pickle had not made that science his particular study, they should be on more equal footing using pistols. So then, that's when there's, I'd say maybe, oh gosh, why is this, okay, there we go, taunting. We should use pistols if you're not good with a sword. Okay. This quickens the pace again, because that's when they start to duel it out, right? And then the duel itself takes very little time. So it kind of is fast, and then it's slow, and then it's fast again. So it kind of like, everyone gets riled up, and then they back off, and they're like, oh, okay, here, you sit, let me get your boots off for you, and then I'll sit, and you get my boots off, and let's put our coats over here, and let's, you know, they're being really nice about everything, okay? The last thing that I would talk about is the selection of detail. There are a couple of things in here, and maybe I would talk about that taunt. Talks about, let's be on equal footing, as a taunt to his ability with the sword. It also, let's see, it also right here, Gauntlet, loath to take the advantage of his unguarded heat, stood on the defensive. In the second lunge, you know, his sword breaks. It's at the end here. Far from making an insolent use of the victory he had gained. So, far from making use of the insolent, was it? Insolent victory he had gained. Make an insolent use. Of the victory he had gained. He says, put up his Toledo with, put up his sword with great, and I would put that in deliberation. Shows he's trying to basically gloat in his victory without actually saying it. Staying socially appropriate, but still getting his digs in. Okay. And then I would conclude that whole thing. There's other detail that was at the first that I would probably use as well. Like, the soldier's wrath was inflamed when he calls him a presumptuous boy, an insolent upstart, things like that. I would definitely mention. And at the very end, when he says, treat a gentleman in distress with more respect for the future, he slips on his boots and he stalks back to the inn. It's kind of like, okay, I'm taking my victory lap now. Again, without saying it. So there's a lot that's not being flat out said in this exchange between the two. But as readers, you can look at it and you can say, okay, they're pretty mad. They're not pleased with one another because the one loves this girl and the other one, it's his sister. And he's like, my sister deserves better than you. He's like, oh yeah? I don't think so. So that is kind of how I would go about that particular passage. Just want to scroll up here to the top again. Just to remind you that the thesis essentially is just taking the prompt, the wording of the prompt, using that as your template, and then adding to it. Adding to it, here's how I know this. Again, hearkening back to the music videos that I had you watch and not listen to. You could tell that the girl and the guy were having an argument because you could tell through his body language, the broken picture. You can see him, like, he drops a bunch of, a bunch of things that happen. I'm not thinking very clearly of all of that. Or the Rescue Me video with the kid riding his bike and the kids that are bullying him. You can tell he's being bullied because he's writing as if he's being chased, because he is being chased. You can tell the boys are ganging up on him because the looks on their faces. You can tell they're taunting him because of the way in which, even just the way in which they're standing with this audacious look about them, and the strength about their body. Like, look how much better I am than you are. And then, he shows them a little bit. So we know that in those clips, we know that through body language. We know that through symbols, like the symbol of that picture frame being broken is much like their relationship crashing. So your thesis is really just taking what you've been asked to analyze and plugging in, here's how I know it. Here's how I know that relationship it's a bit of a complex interplay. I'm reading those words. It's a bit of it's like they're butting heads against one another. Their emotions where they really want to just freak out and hurt each other, but also being socially correct, societally appropriate, and doing what society would deem as best in handling this situation. So hopefully that helped. I will now record a language prompt where I do pretty much the same thing. Okay, thanks guys.